I mean, I know the guy was on some hard drugs, but there is no excuse. Hi folks, Harry here, and welcome back to Other Worlds Than These. So, today's video is my first Stephen King related video since I think the 4th of June, which was my most underrated Stephen King books video, which is actually one of the most popular videos I've ever made. Actually, I'm pretty sure my top 5 or 6 most popular videos on my channel are Stephen King related videos, so I thought I'd make another one today. So this one is all about why you should/shouldn't read It by Stephen King, this absolute chunker of a book. In this video, I will be explaining why I think you should read this, but also I should be explaining why you shouldn't read this. So consider this maybe a video essay, if you will. So I should probably start this video by saying that I love It by Stephen King. This is maybe my 3rd or 4th favourite book of all time. I happen to have 4 editions of it. One is a first edition second printing. I have the 2017 movie tie-in, the 2019 movie tie-in, and the Hodder Rainbow editions that I like to collect. So these are all of my editions. I just thought I should start it off straight away by saying that I love this book. So in case you did not know, I should probably explain what this book is about. So It is about a demonic entity known as It, or Pennywise the Dancing Clown, which is a shapeshifter that can shapeshift into your biggest fears and become that fear incarnate, and it preys on children by disguising as a clown and taking them into the sewers. So while I'm talking about this book, I'm just going to be showing this edition because it's the one I'm most proud of owning. So my first reason as to why you should read this book is it has had such an influence on pop culture today. I don't think that the horror genre would be anywhere without It by Stephen King. This book was a revelation, so listen to my declaration, to the horror genre. And I think that the genre would be absolutely nowhere had it not been published in 1986. This one was just an absolute masterpiece. Nothing like this has ever been done in horror before. Sure, there's been demonic entities, sure, there's been things that prey on people, but there has never been an idea so extravagant and horrifying as It. Pennywise the Dancing Clown, It, the Deadlights, whatever you want to refer to it as, is easily one of the most horrifying icons that has ever been in horror history. You got Michael Myers, you got Freddy Krueger, you got Jason Voorhees, screw all of them. They're just killers, supernatural or not, they're just killers. It is a haunting entity that terrorizes people, shapeshifts into their biggest fear, and eats them. I honestly cannot think of anything more horrifying than that, to be honest. I mean, I can, but when it comes to horror villains, that just tops everything. I don't think I've ever read a book or watched a horror movie that has ever had any entity creepier than this guy right here. King is just a genius. Everything that he's ever written, well, except for maybe this, has been absolutely genius. Stephen King's books are some of the best things that I've ever come across. That's why he's my favourite author of all time. And It just changed the horror genre forever, and I think that's one reason why you should definitely read this. So to argue against that, a reason why I think you should not read this is it may be too scary. So if you're watching this video, you're either a horror addict that has for some reason just not read one of the best horror novels in history, or you are a horror scaredy cat and are wondering if this book would be suitable for you. For those of you who think that this would not be suitable for you, you're probably right. Like, if you don't think you could handle the concept, don't even bother picking this up. I think if you've watched the movie and barely survived, don't read this. This is a million times more horrifying than the movie. But if you watch the movie and you're absolutely fine with it, you should definitely give it a go. But I don't think you should read this if you're very easily horrified, because there are some terrifying scenes in this that chill me to the bone. There are some other scenes in this that low-key traumatized me, so I will get into that later on in the video. But if you think that this would be too scary for you, you're right. So another reason why I think you should read this is it's huge. So for some people you might use this as a reason why you shouldn't read this, but I personally think that this is a reason why you should. So This copy right here is only about 900 pages. I have a copy that's 1,100, I have a copy that's 1,000, I have a copy that's 1,400. So regardless of the edition, it's still a massive, massive book. But the reason why I think that's a good thing is because it was my first ever adult novel, it was my first ever horror novel, and I'm pretty sure it was my first book that was bigger than like 400 pages. I read this when I was 12 years old. I'm now 14, just in case you were wondering. Prior to it, I was reading things like David Walliams and Jeff Kinney, which was a massive jump. Like, imagine going from reading Billionaire Boy and Gangster Granny to one of the most horrifying books in existence. Actually, in my first ever video, my review of The Institute, please don't watch it, it's a terrible video, I hate it so much. I basically just explained how I came across Stephen King. So basically the gist was, I watched the 2017 movie a few Halloweens ago and absolutely loved it, asked for the book for Christmas, read it, adored it. There we go, that's the simple version. And it was just a brick. And it took me 4 months to read, but it being my first ever massive novel, I have to say, this opened my eyes to other massive books. Like right now, I'm currently like about to start reading Les Miserables, which is like 1,300 pages. And that book is huge. And then there's The Stand by Stephen King. I'm gonna put this down because this is a hardcover and it's very heavy. It opened my eyes to other massive books. I feel like if you don't read massive books that often, then you won't understand how great they can be. But because it's massive, you get to spend so much time with each of the characters. I cannot think of a book with more developed characters than it. It just has some of the greatest characters I've ever seen. But that is purely because of the length. Yes, I think the length is a little bit tedious, which kind of bleeds over into my next point. Like, it definitely could have been a few hundred pages shorter, but it's still just absolutely great. So, as I just kind of previously mentioned, my reason as to why you shouldn't read this is because it is tediously long and at some points does drag on and gets a little bit boring and bloated. This book is a masterpiece, there's no doubt about it. This is one of the best horror novels, probably the best horror novel that's ever been written. But it could definitely do with a little bit of trimming down. There are some points in this book, because it's so big, that it's absolutely a given that at some points in this book it will get a little bit boring. So I reckon this book could easily be 800 pages and you wouldn't miss out on anything. There are definitely some things in this book that are not necessary to the story and just drag on a little bit, but if you're fine with that and you just want to delve into the world of Pennywise, then I would definitely give this a try. But I would say that this book is really, really annoying when it comes to just getting a straight story, because this book meanders like hell. A lot of people point this to Stephen King being off his head on cocaine when he wrote this, meaning like he wasn't focused, and I think that was probably something to do with it, but I feel like this book would not be the same without the meandering, but I feel like I would have appreciated it a lot more without it. I feel like a lot of it was just unnecessary. So that is a reason why you should not read this. So another reason why I think you should read this is the world building. So this book is set in a fictional town called Derry in Maine. The town of Derry has appeared in many a Stephen King book. It has appeared in 11/22/63, it has appeared in Dreamcatcher. It's just a very prominent location in Stephen King's works. And this was the first novel to ever be set in Derry, Maine. So if you want to read some Stephen King that's all set in the same place, this is definitely a good place to start. Also, just the town of Derry itself is so horrifying because it's essentially owned by it. So it's explained in this book how it came to be, and Derry was sort of built around it, and then in the 1700s it came out just like, what's up, and just started preying on children. The town of Derry itself, I feel like, is a character. Stephen King is very, very good at making his settings its own character. So the Overlook Hotel in The Shining, the Pet Cemetery, and the Indian Micmac burial ground in Pet Cemetery, they are their own characters, their own villains. And I feel like Derry is its own character as well as it, the Deadlights, Pennywise, whatever. There is so much world building surrounding Derry, but also towards the end of this book, I won't get into spoilers, but towards the end of this book, it really shows how much Derry and it are connected to each other, and how Derry is built off it, sort of, in a way. And I just find that really, really interesting. So that's why you should read this, for sure. So I think the main reason why you should not read this is it has an unbelievable amount of triggers. So Let me just list a couple of triggers for you. It has a lot of bad language, it has sexual assault, racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, suicide, general assault, murder, grief, death. I just named 10 triggers for you, all in one 1,000-page book. Okay, so I feel like another trigger that is very important to mention here is domestic abuse. That is a very common theme, whether that's, well, specifically father and daughter, but also within a marriage. So if any of those topics do affect you badly, I would massively consider that before you pick up this book. There are definitely some scenes in this regarding sexual assault, homophobia, racism, that were just, they traumatized me. They were absolutely horrifying. There are a lot of slurs used towards Black, Jewish and gay people, which is just not okay. Like, as much as I love this book, I must say that a lot of the language and a lot of the scenes in this book are not acceptable in 2020. This came out in 1986, but even in 1986 that was not okay. I think the most infamous scene in this entire book was the sewer scene. So this is probably the scene that traumatized me the most, and it's not violent, it's just disgusting. I don't think I could even talk about the scene without getting banned from YouTube forever, but it's got a lot of underage activity. I cannot say any more, but it's horrifying, and I don't think you should ever think that that is okay or enjoy that scene. If you have ever read this book and enjoyed that scene, I'm sorry, you're a monster, get out of my life. That scene was just absolutely horrifying. So the probably hundreds of triggers in this book definitely contribute towards why you shouldn't. But to end on a positive note, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about why you should read this. So if you've watched the movie and thoroughly enjoyed it, which I did, I should definitely recommend picking this book up, because I think it's very important to know where the ideas for the movie came from and the genius that is good old Steve here, and how he came up with such a genius idea. Read the source material. I think you should always read the source material. Usually, a movie adaptation of a book is nowhere near as fleshed out as the original book. And with a 1,000-page book like this one, it's guaranteed that there are a lot of details from the movie that were missed out, because otherwise the movie would be 6 hours long. I think if you want more background to Pennywise, then you should definitely read this. Another reason why you should read this is it is connected to the Dark Tower universe, which is Stephen King's magnum opus. Like, you should definitely pick up the Dark Tower series. It is heavily connected to that in a way, and I think you should read the Dark Tower series to fully have a good understanding of this. I also think that this is just the perfect novel for horror addicts. Like, 1,000 pages of just straight horror and terror sounds like a horror addict's dream to me. So that is why I recommend this book. So all of those reasons are why I think you should/shouldn't read it by Stephen King. I think it's very important that I should tell you why I think you should read this, so like a recommendation, but also a lot of reasons as to why you shouldn't, depending on who you are and what sort of beliefs you have, what sort of things trigger you. I think it was very important for me to let you know about those things before you dive into this book. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a big fat thumbs up. Comment below if you have read this book, if you agree with any of the things I said, or if you now want to read this book / don't want to read this book after what I've just told you. I really want to know your opinions on this book. Subscribe to my channel for more bookish videos and turn on post notifications by ringing that bell if you want to be notified every single time I upload a new video. My Goodreads link is in the description below, as is my Instagram. I hope you had a great day, hope tomorrow's even better, and I will see you in another video. You'll float too.